My name is Dick Chichester. I was born and raised right in this house we're in now. I went to Virginia Tech, graduated and came out and I milked cows for 3 years. My main interest was in the genetics part of the dairy industry. So I decided I wanted to get into AI. And so I looked around and I finally got a job in West Virginia. There was a little AI co-op in West Virginia then, and they hired me as manager. In 1963, I went over there in 61. In 1963, the Maryland, West Virginia board decided they wanted to hire a sire analyst because they didn't have one, and the bulls were being picked by sire committees, and we also didn't have enough of a program to compete with some of the large organizations. So they looked around and they hired me to be sire analyst. So I moved to Maryland, Frederick, and then I bought bulls for them and ran that sire program for a while. Then Sire Power got started. They merged with the Pennsylvania, New Jersey studs. And so when they did that, the headquarters was in Tunkhannock, Pennsylvania, and the new manager there hired me to direct the sire programs. But I wouldn't move to Pennsylvania. I wanted to stay in Maryland. I loved Maryland. I stayed there until 1971, and about that time, Dr. Jim Nichols was hired from Virginia Tech as the manager of select sires. And he started looking around for some staff, and he called, asked if I would talk to him about coming out there as director of public relations. And they needed help there because they'd had an ad agency that didn't know anything about cattle or anything like that. And the ads I thought were bad. So, but I told him no, that I wanted to stay in Maryland. And finally he kept asking, and had people I respected, dairymen, call me and said, we'd like to have you come. So one night I got to talking to him for the last time. Finally I hung up the phone and turned to my wife and said, Jackie, we're moving to Ohio. And we did. 2 years later, the Virginia Tech called him back to be Dean of Agriculture. And so when he left, the board came to me and said, will you take this on temporarily until we get somebody that qualified? Well, I did that, but they took 28 years to get somebody qualified. So it was a great journey. When I ran it for 27 years and loved it, and we grew. We added several new member organizations. The first one on my watch was All West, and so that was a long story. But from then on, then I retired in 2000 and moved back here. Way back in 1969, All West was part of the discussions with select sires that brought some new ones in, Michigan, Virginia, some southern ones in Cache Valley in Utah. The All West thing, and I don't know why it didn't work out. They didn't become a member, but they decided to exchange semen. Well, my experience with one stud exchanging semen with another is that the other party only wants the better bulls. Well, they're the ones that the producing stud wants, so that didn't work too well. But then in 1974, USDA changed the proof formula. And before that, it was a cow gave so much milk, her herd mate gave so much milk, and the difference was what went into the formula. And it turns out that some of the bulls that had herd mates that were sired by rather mediocre bulls, those proofs were better than the ones that had daughters by better bulls. So the formula took into consideration the sires of the herd mates, so that you had more competition if you had better sires of herd mates. And the select sires did real well on that. All West did not do too well. Archie Nelson has been a good friend of mine for years and years and years. We knew each other well. We were both sire analysts. Matter of fact, when he would come back to Maryland from time to time, I would point out some cows that maybe All West should get some bulls from, which they did. And saying the reverse true too. So Archie called and said, we're kind of looking to affiliate. Said ABS flew us back to him. He and Cliff Bailey flew them back to Wisconsin, wined and dined them, and told them how great it would be if they were together. But he said, I thought maybe we should talk to you before we did that. I was almost on the next plane to Seattle. So Archie and I met in Seattle. And we talked about the possibilities, and it was not just a one-way deal because there were problems. We were already in California, which is All West's country, and we had Tom and Lloyd there working, and we weren't going to put them out of business. All West was not going to get out of California. That was where the most cows are. And so we finally worked out between Lloyd and Tom and I and Archie. I met with Tom and Lloyd out there in a couple nights, and we had long night talks how this could work out. And we finally worked something out, and then we also, Cache Valley in Utah was working in Montana, so was All West. So the way we handled that, the manager, Archie, and the manager of All West, of us, Cache Valley, came back to select for a meeting one time, and I put them in a room. I said, I want you all to take a map of Montana and draw a line and say one of the area on one line, side of one line is All West and the other was Cache Valley, and they did that. And so we went with All West, and All West went with us in 1975. And of course they had bulls out there, and some of them came back to Columbus and joined our sire battery. But then we sold them semen, and I guess, as they say, the rest is history. They've been a very successful organization. I went to all, if not most, if not all of their annual meetings from 1975 until I retired. I used to go, and I loved it because they treated people, All West treated people really well. Well, the high points for Select was it gave us a marketing area on the West Coast, which had been tough for us all along because that's where the cows were, and that's where still are. That's where the competition was. So it was difficult for us to get in there as an outsider without being part of the co-op that had been there for a while. And I think the advantage for All West was a more comprehensive sire program. Better. Oh, a bull call elevation helped that whole process along, I might add. They had hired me in 1973, and I called myself temporary manager there for about 6 months or something, before they had a meeting and came in and wanted me to take the job. But even though I didn't know I was going to be there for more than 6 months, I figured we needed to do some things. And so we had a lot of good bulls. And at that time, there wasn't any scientific way to tell about the type. They hadn't put these formulas in at 1.34 for type and none of that stuff. And we had the bulls, and we had our own people evaluate, and we'd use these stars. I don't know whether you saw a sire record But if a bull had really good udders, we'd put 4-star for full udder, let's say, and 3 stars for rear udder and things like that. Well, that was the best we had, but it wasn't very scientific. But, so I decided with all these good bulls, we needed somebody that knew the bulls and was a good cowman to go around and set up a program where a good cow person could go into a farm and look at the cows and then if you knew the bulls, you could write down a first choice, second choice bull, and so we just came out one day. We named it SMS, Select Mating Service. And so I had known Ron Long for a while. When I was in Maryland, I used to, when there's young sire daughters being classified, I'd like to follow the classifier around and see what they're doing. Ron Long came in there, and I didn't know him, but he came and he'd go into these barns and he'd score these cows, and he, I thought he got them right. And either they were right or we were both wrong, one or the other. And then I thought his demeanor with the dairyman was good. He could communicate, and you know, he could score a cow low and kind of like dairymen like it, you know. And that's a kind. So he had quit classifying. He was with a herd in Ohio, so I met with him. I called him to see if he'd meet with me, and we met one night in a restaurant down in southwest Ohio, and I told him what kind of work I wanted, and so he seemed interested, and I didn't have anything formal, but I just wrote down on a napkin what I want him to do. So they all teased me the job description written on a napkin. And anyway, and that's all. There wasn't any contract or anything, but he came to work and he started that. And I had no idea it would do what it's done. Somebody says it's 4 or 5 million cows now, and it's all over the world. And of course, it's computerized, and they do a lot better job. It takes into consideration inbreeding, and it does a better job than we thought it would do then, or that it was designed to do, but it worked. And Ron Long was a great one to start it because he knew the people and he knew the cows, and that's what it takes, people and cows. I'm happy that we did that. All West characters. Well, I'd have to start out with Lloyd Vieira. He was and still is a character. Dedicated to the dairy industry, dedicated to the well-being of dairymen. But in addition to that, let us know what he thought. Lloyd was on the phone a lot, and he had to answer a bunch of questions, and I was happy to try to do that as best I could. Tom Olson was a little quieter. I thought a real cowman. I knew him while he was in Kansas before he went to Arlinda. I used to go out there, and he was herdsman at Arlinda, and I would contract bulls. I think Wally Lindskog gave him most of the authority to do, and we had bought some pretty good, even when I was back working for Sire Power. I knew him then. Well, I knew him, I was on his farm when he was in Kansas too. I knew him and his dad. He was one of my favorite people. Matter of fact, when I knew he had cancer and was about to die, I called him about a week before he died, and I actually told him I loved him. Of course, Archie was a character. I wouldn't call him a character, I call him a real good friend. And he and I saw a lot the same things in the AI industry, and he was a good friend. Wally Lindskog was a character. He had his own opinions too, and we got several bulls from him. One of them was Arlinda Rotate, who turned out to be one of the good bulls of the breed. That's about all the characters you need to know right now. I loved those trips. I got to know a lot of dairymen on those trips, you know, and they were very interesting, and I loved every minute of it. I would fly into San Francisco and take a plane from there to Modesto. Tom would meet me at the airport usually, and I'd stay at the Divine Garden. It's the first time I'd ever met Bill Clark, and I liked him from day one. And I'll never forget, it was a hot day. It was about 100 degrees. We were there in the summer, obviously, and we went to Bill Clark's place, and we looked at the cows, and finally he said, "Come on in the house and have a beer." And we did, and on that hot day, that cold beer was maybe the best beer I've ever had in my life. And I've known Bill. He's another one of my real good friends from California. And I got to meet all kinds of dairymen. There's no need to name. There's so many I can't just name them all. But one of them was Bill Genesi. When he was a dairyman there, got to know him, and he's another good friend. I was just amazed at how much milk they got, and they kept them in those shady areas and all that stuff, but they gave a lot of milk, and they bred good cattle. I loved it. They didn't have those big herds anywhere I'd been, not in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland where I'd been. There was some, you know, a big herd of 75, 80 cows. Mm-hmm. But we went out there, and at that time there were hundreds of them, maybe 1,000, and now that's small in California. Always in favor of the maternal side, especially I grew up with 3 of us boys, no sisters, and my dad always told us to have a lot of respect for the women. And in the cattle business, you have respect for the female side of the pedigrees, and by the way, genomics takes that into consideration. I thought they had a place in the industry. Now, I wasn't in favor of everything they said, but I thought enough of them that one time they had a Holstein convention in Charleston, South Carolina, and they invited me to come down to that convention. The Breeders' Majority had a meeting there. They asked me to come down and speak to those people, which I did, and I thought I tried to cover the bridge between what they wanted and what the mainstream part of the industry. It wasn't all that different when you get dragged down to it, but I've always been an advocate for good type, because I came up with the phrase, I think, that good udders always be in style, which they were then, they still are, and they were talking about some things that they needed a little help clarifying it, but on the average, they wanted the same thing the rest of the dairymen wanted: a better Holstein cow. Oh, putting the computer into the AI industry was one of the big ones. You can almost, I wouldn't recommend anybody do it, but you can almost sit at your desk behind the computer and buy bulls. But I don't like that. Of course, the 2 of them were, since I've retired, sex, semen, and genomics. But I got into the AI industry before frozen semen, and it was fresh semen. And my first job was to supervise 26 technicians in West Virginia. The bulls were in Maryland, so they had to put the semen into a container with some dry ice around these test tubes, and put it on a bus and ship it to West Virginia overnight. Technician would go in the bus station the next day, get the semen, kept it for 3 days, and then the next shipment would come in. So frozen semen was my first big change, and that allowed a lot of things to happen, which is, you could breed a cow in West Virginia to a bull in Wisconsin or California anywhere. I couldn't do that before. Well, you could if you shipped the semen on a bus all night, but not many people did that. But that was the forerunner, the frozen semen, was a forerunner of all these mergers and so forth that went together. You could put these organizations together, and then this semen was shipped in liquid nitrogen and so forth, and that was a big change. Another big change is in the formula for proofs. When I first started knowing things, it was just a daughter-dam comparison. Daughter gave 16,000 milk, and the dam gave 14,000. Doesn't matter where or when they were milked, and the bull got credit for 2,000 plus. But all that stuff changed. And I remember when you could buy a bull on 7 daughter-dam comparisons, and I used to do them by hand, you know, and go into herds and look at the cattle, and if you liked them, then you try to get go to the DHIA book, get the production figures, come back, and with a little old ad machine, ME all those records, ME all the herd made records, and that's the first way I did it. And that maybe looked crude, but it's the best we had at the time. We wound up with some daggone good people there. When I retired, we were selling 8 million units. When I got there, it was 1.5. And no, it grew. I was pleased with the growth, but I never thought we were selling enough, you know. But I was proud of what we did. And today, I never dreamed that they're going to try to, it's the year 15, they're going to try to sell 15 million units in year 15, and I think they will. Elevation. When I started at Select Sires, Elevation had gotten his first proof. And by the time I came manager in 1973, he had grown to be the most popular bull maybe in the world. He brought income in, which he should have, because he was the best bull. He let the industry know that you could combine type and production in the same package, and not everybody believed that. And he also taught us a lot of things. Number one, in 1971 in the summer, not very many people know this, it was hot, and he was in a stall, and his semen quality that summer was not good enough to keep. We discarded all of his semen that summer. Can you imagine a tragedy if something was like that? But anyway, what we did was, it was a cinder block building. We knocked a hole in the cinder block and put in one of these air conditioners like you have in a room now. And we pumped that, and we sealed up the rest of the stall. And the next summer, when he had air conditioning, kept it all the semen. And now the whole barn is air conditioned, Select Sires now. But he taught us that air conditioning worked. The other thing he did, this is much later, he was a good semen producer. With the technology they had then, he could make more semen than he did then. But he also, one day I used to go back and look at the bulls in the lab and everything almost every day. So I walked out there, and I came back from there and looked in the trash can, and here was some straws of Elevation. Man, I about came unglued. And so I went to George Miller, and then we went to Cliff Marshall, who's the director of the lab, and said, why are you throwing away that semen? Well, we knew, you know. They didn't care what the bull was, they wanted semen quality. And then George said, Cliff, does that semen have any calves in it? And Cliff said, yeah, just not quite as many as you would want with a regular dose. So anyway, we came up with what we call red top semen. What he did It made a naive rookie manager look a little smarter than he was. One day they came in and said, "You can't do anything. He'll never get up." Well, when that happens, you gotta put him out. So I went back in his stall by myself with the elevation laying there. Went in there and patted him on his head, walked over his stall, big tears. And then I said, "I don't want to be here when that happened," so I left. But I told him, I said, "Now I want this bull buried out in front of the pond, front of the building." And somebody said, "Oh, you can't do that. Health department won't let you do that." I said, "He's going out there, and you just tell the health department if they want to dig him up and take him away, be my guest." And of course, no health department ever came, and he's been out there, and we have that headstone, and I think that makes the place look a little bit more attractive. And if you got the right people, you'll get the good bulls. And it also works in reverse. If you've got the right bulls, people want to come to work for you. So it's a two-way street, and we thought we did it that way, and we like it that way. We've always tried to run this organization like you would a family. Treat people like they ought to be treated.